Welcome to the Crystal Library, a pocket-sized portal into the magical, mysterious, and sometimes misunderstood world of crystals. I'm your host, Ashley, and each week I'll guide you as we explore one enchanting stone, its history, lore, healing properties, and one easy way to invite its magic into your everyday life. Whether you're crystal curious or deep in the woo, this is your space to learn, explore, and expand your connection to the mineral realm, one glittering gem at a time. So let's open the library and see which crystal wants to speak today. Welcome back to the Crystal Library. You guys, I am literally coming in hot from work. I still have my scrubs on and I have no makeup on. So this is what I look like in IRL. I guess you wouldn't say in IRL. You'd say, this is what I look like IRL. Never mind. I don't know why I'm trying to sound catchy, but yeah, my hair's a mess and I am just coming in hot because I was so excited to get home and record this episode. So let's go. Okay, let me just get all my stuff set up here. My crystal, everything. This was literally the best and most interesting episode to record. To write. Oh my gosh, you guys, hold on. I haven't had enough of my caffeinated beverage here to get me started. It's been a long day. Let me just share really quick before I hop into things. So in my regular job, I have been getting these emails and text messages. And I'll be real, I wasn't really paying attention to them. But for some reason, at 5:30 this morning, something inside my brain said, I think you should look at those messages a little bit closer. So I did, and then realized that I had to be at a meeting by 7 a.m. and I had a 45-minute drive to that meeting, and it was now 5:45. And so I basically just leapt out of bed, threw on my scrubs, made a cup of coffee, and peeled out of my house and made it to the meeting on time. But it was such an abrupt start to the day. And I feel like I've been just trying to play catch up all day. Either way, I have just been thoroughly enjoying putting this podcast episode together. So let's get into it. Okay. So until I started researching this episode, I didn't really know what Lemuria was. I'd encountered the word. You can't spend any real time in esoteric or crystal spaces without running into it. But I'll be honest with you, it always sounded a little too out there for me, even as someone who works with crystals, who identifies as a witch, who is very comfortable in the weird and the mystical. Lemuria gave me a pause. It had a quality I couldn't quite get behind, and so I never looked into it. Every time it came up, I just moved on. And then I started researching this episode, and what I found was not what I expected, because the origin of this mythology is genuinely strange and not in the way I thought. It doesn't begin with channeled transmissions or ancient priests. It begins with a British zoologist in 1864 who was trying to figure out why lemur fossils showed up in two completely different places on the map. That's where Lemuria comes from. And the journey from there to the crystal in your hand is one of the more unexpected stories I've come across doing this show. So today we're doing something a little different. We're going to actually trace that journey all the way back before we talk about the stone, because I think knowing where this mythology comes from doesn't diminish it, it deepens it. So welcome to the Crystal Library. Today's stone is Lemurian Quartz, and if you've always found the mythology around it a little hard to get behind, this episode is for you. I have my piece of Lemurian Quartz right here. So we're going to get into the history. Where did Lemuria come from? Lemuria was not born in a temple. It was not channeled by ancient priestess. It was not passed down through indigenous tradition. It was proposed in 1864 by a British zoologist named Philip Sclater, and it was about lemurs. Sclater was trying to solve a biogeography problem. He'd found lemur fossils in both Madagascar and India, but not in Africa or the Middle East. The land masses in between. So those are the land masses in between Madagascar and India. So how did the same animal end up in two places separated by an ocean? His answer, there must have been a land bridge. A continent now lost connecting what we now call the Indian Ocean region. He named it Lemuria, after the primates that inspired the hypothesis. He laid it out in a paper called The Mammals of Madagascar, published in the Quarterly Journal of Science. This wasn't fringe thinking. It was a reasonable hypothesis given what was known at the time. And it's worth noting, Sclater was doing exactly what good scientists do, proposing a hypothesis to explain observed data. He wasn't making things up. He was wrong, but wrong in an interesting way that actually pointed toward the right answer. The imagined continent was reaching for plate tectonics before anyone had the framework to see it. Gotta let my dog in here. Come on in, Lila. She always needs to come in when I'm recording. You can always hear her caller in the background. So, other scientists, including German biologist Ernest Haeckel, expanded on it. Haeckel actually went further, proposing that Lemuria might be the original homeland of humanity, the evolutionary cradle. Here's the thing, though. The hypothesis was made obsolete within a century. When plate tectonics became the accepted framework in the 1960s, the mystery of those lemur fossils was solved. The continents themselves had moved. Madagascar and India had once been part of the same supercontinent, Gondwana, and drifted apart over millions of years. No sunken landmass required. And here's the irony. The continent Sclater imagined wasn't real, but the ancient landmass that actually explained the fossils was. He was closer to the truth than he knew. Philip Sclater's Lemuria ceased to be a scientific idea, but it had already escaped into the imagination. Once an idea exists, you cannot control what happens to it. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Russian occultist, co-founder of the Theosophical Society, one of the most influential esoteric figures of the 19th century, found Sclater's Lemuria and did something extraordinary with it. In her 1888 work, The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky wove Lemuria into a vast cosmological framework she called root races, epics of human evolution, each associated with a particular civilization and a particular continent. Lemuria, in her telling, was the home of the third root race, not quite physical beings by modern understanding, more etheric, androgynous, communicating telepathically rather than verbally, a civilization of spiritual giants who lived in direct relationship with divine consciousness. She described them building cities, developing arts and sciences, possessing a functioning third eye that gave them direct perception of the divine. And she said their continent, which she moved from Sclater's Indian Ocean to the Pacific, was eventually destroyed by volcanic fire and sank beneath the waves. Blavatsky explicitly acknowledged that she took Sclater's name. She wasn't hiding the origin. What she was doing was taking a scientific hypothesis about animal migration and transforming it into a myth about human origins, spiritual evolution, and lost wisdom. And that's actually a consistent pattern across Western esotericism. The Theosophists were in constant dialogue with the science of their time. They weren't rejecting it, they were reframing it. Rudolf Steiner expanded it further. Steiner was an Austrian philosopher and occultist, founder of Anthroposophy, a spiritual movement that blended Western esotericism with scientific thinking. He wrote exclusively on Lemuria and Atlantis as the literal epics of human evolution. William Scott Elliot, a British theosophist and contemporary of Blavatsky, wrote entire volumes dedicated to mapping Lemurian civilization in meticulous, almost archaeological detail, claiming the information came through clairvoyant research. By the turn of the 20th century, Lemuria had fully migrated from science into spirituality, and the mythology had taken on a life entirely of its own. And whether or not you take any of this literally, there's something worth acknowledging in what the Lemurian mythology keeps returning to. A memory of a time when humans lived in closer relationship with the natural and divine world. That thread shows up across a lot of traditions and a lot of cultures. The specifics differ, the longing underneath them doesn't. This is where the story connects to the crystal in your hand. The specific connection between Lemurian mythology and quartz crystals was made in the 1990s, okay? 1990s, not that long ago. And one name comes up consistently: Katrina Raphael, crystal healer, author, founder of the Crystal Academy of Advanced Healing Arts, and one of the most influential figures in modern crystal healing. In the late 1990s, a mineral dealer named David Geiger came across an unusual cluster of quartz points in the Serra do Cabral mountain ranges in Minas Gerais. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Brazil. We'll just say Brazil. What made them unusual was how they were found, lying loose in sandy soil, not attached to host rock or matrix. And that detail matters. Most quartz grows attached to host rock. Finding these lying loose in sand felt to the people who encountered them like they had been placed there, like they were waiting. Their surface was also distinctive, horizontal striations running across alternating faces of the crystal, ladder-like grooves you could feel with your fingertip. Geiger sent samples to Raphael. She worked with them, meditated with them, and felt, as she described it, a strong presence of Lemurian energy. She wrote about them in her newsletter around the year 2000, and almost overnight, a new category of crystal was born. The mythology that formed around them was specific. The Lemurians, foreseeing the destruction of their civilization, programmed these crystals with their accumulated wisdom and planted them in the earth, seeds of knowledge for a future humanity ready to receive them. The striations were the code. Run your finger along them in meditation, and you begin to decode the transmission. And that word, seed, is worth acknowledging. In the mythology, these weren't just vessels of stored information. They were seeds. Something meant to lie dormant in the earth until the moment humanity was ready to receive what was encoded in them. A seed doesn't activate until conditions are right. The implication is that we are the conditions that are right now, right? The implication is that we are the conditions that are right now. Okay, so from a gemological standpoint, what we call Lemurian quartz is standard silicon dioxide with a hardness of 7 on the Mohs scale. The striations are a product of what mineralogists call the mesocrystal growth habit, horizontal oscillatory growth lines created by fluctuations in temperature and mineral content during the crystal's formation deep within hydrothermal veins. The crystal grew in pulses. Each line is a growth interval. They are real, they are geological, and they are beautiful. The designation Lemurian is not recognized by geologists. It is, in the strict sense, a trade name, a marketing category applied to crystals from that particular mine in Brazil with the distinct striations. The label has since spread to striated quartz from other locations worldwide. And if you want to be a rigorous practitioner about this, a true Lemurian seed crystal in the original sense comes specifically from Serra do Cabral, has striations on exactly 3 alternating faces, is frosted on the surface, and tapers to a distinct point. A lot of what's sold as Lemurian doesn't strictly meet that description. So you really need to know what you're buying. And yet, something happened when these crystals found the spiritual community. Something continues to happen. Let's talk about what you're actually holding when you hold one of these. Lemurian quartz is clear quartz. Hexagonal, trigonal crystal structure, silicon dioxide, the most abundant mineral family on Earth. Mohs hardness of 7. Most specimens come from Minas Gerais, Brazil. Though striated quartz with similar energetic designations has been found in Colombia, Peru, Madagascar, and elsewhere. What makes it visually and texturally distinct from regular clear quartz is the striations, those horizontal ladder-like grooves running across alternating faces of the crystal. They're not decorative. They're formed as the crystal grew, each line representing a pause, a shift in temperature, or mineral content in the surrounding fluid before growth resumed. The crystal is, in a very literal sense, a record of its own becoming. Most Lemurian points are found as single terminations, one point, not a cluster. They tend to have a slightly frosted, matte quality on the surface rather than the glass smooth clarity of polished quartz. Because they grew in sandy soil rather than attached to rock matrix. The frosted surface is not damage, it's authenticity. Color variations exist across the family. Standard Lemurian seed crystals are colorless to slightly hazy. Pink Lemurians get their color from hematite inclusions layered through the crystal during growth. Iron-rich and heart chakra attuned. Gold Lemurians carry iron content of a different kind, giving them a warmer solar quality. Root Lemurians are rarer, associated with grounding and earth connection. I'm not going deep on individual varieties today. Each one of those probably deserves its own episode, but know that the family is wide. What the metaphysical tradition consistently identifies in all of them is a quality of connection, not just to personal guides or higher self, but to something broader, a network. The seed crystals are described as beacons of light and ancient wisdom in the modern world, with a special affinity for the nervous system, the brain, and the heart. Psychologically, they're said to counteract feelings of isolation and separation, to remind us we belong to something larger than our individual experience. That's interesting when you hold it up against the geology. This crystal grew in solitude, no matrix, no cluster, and yet its defining metaphysical property is connection. The stone that grew alone teaches us we are not. The striations themselves are the tactile entry point into working with this stone. You can trace them with your fingertip in meditation. And that's not just metaphor, it's a somatic practice. You're giving your nervous system something physical to anchor to while your mind quiets. And the nervous system connection is worth acknowledging here. Quartz is piezoelectric. It generates an electrical charge under mechanical pressure. Your body is bioelectric. There's a real physical interface happening when you hold these stones, even if science hasn't fully mapped what it means. Here's the thing I kept coming back to while I was researching this. Lemuria, as a literal physical civilization, almost certainly never existed. The scientific hypothesis that gave it its name was discredited. There is no archaeological evidence for a technologically and spiritually advanced civilization in the Pacific Ocean. The mythology, as we understand it, was built by 19th century occultists, expanded later by writers, and attached to specific Brazilian quartz crystals in the late 1990s. And yet these stones do something. So what is actually happening? And does it require Lemuria to be literally real for it to be real? I want to offer you a framework. Not the framework, because I'm not here to tell you what to believe, but a framework worth considering. Myth is not the opposite of truth. In the oldest human traditions, before rationalism redefined the term, myth was the most compressed form of truth available. It was the container for things that couldn't be said plainly. The myth of Lemuria, of a civilization that lived in unity, in direct relationship with the divine, that encoded its highest knowing into the earth before its destruction, is not describing a historical event. It's describing a human longing so deep it had to take the shape of history to be spoken at all. The longing to belong to something larger than ourselves, the longing to remember something we've forgotten, the longing for a time, real or imagined, when the veil between the physical and the spiritual was thinner, when the earth itself was seen as alive with intelligence rather than something to be extracted from. That longing is not physical. It is extraordinarily real. And it turns out that quartz crystals, with their geological record of their own formation pressed into their surface, their piezoelectric responsiveness, their clarity that catches and distributes light, are remarkable physical anchors for that particular kind of longing. You don't need Lemuria to be a real place for this stone to work. You need it to be a real question. And what did we forget? And how do we remember it? That is one of the realest questions a human can ask. What the mythology gives you is a story, a set of instructions for how to relate to the stone, what to ask of it, what quality of attention to bring. That story was shaped in the 1990s by people in the crystal healing community. It was shaped in the 1880s by Blavatsky. It was shaped in 1864 by a Victorian zoologist who just needed to explain why lemurs lived in two places. Stories don't have to be ancient to be meaningful. This one is meaningful. That's enough. But here's what I'd ask you to hold alongside that. Don't outsource your relationship with this stone to mythology. The story is a door. What's on the other side of it is between you and the crystal. Run your finger along those striations. Notice what happens in your body. Notice what surfaces. That is yours. That doesn't require you to believe in a lost Pacific civilization. And if you do believe in it, if it resonates with you as literal truth, if you feel a soul level recognition when you hold this stone, I'm not here to talk you out of that either. The universe is stranger than any of our frameworks. I hold that possibility open. The stone works either way. And there's one more thing worth acknowledging here. This stone is not about looking backward. It's about vision, big picture thinking, unlocking the secrets of infinite possibility. Not memory of the past, but clarity about what's ahead. What do you see for yourself? What kind of person are you becoming? That reframe is worth acknowledging regardless of where you land on the mythology. The silicon-based crystal structures that form the foundation of every computer chip on the planet, we use quartz resonance to keep time. The idea that geological structures can hold and transmit information is not purely metaphysical. It's the basis of modern computing. So the next time someone raises an eyebrow at the idea of a program crystal, you can remind them that they're carrying several in their pocket right now. Now I want to talk about how to work with Lemurian quartz. However you hold the mythology, literally, metaphorically, or somewhere in between, here's how to actually work with this stone. The foundational practice is tactile. Hold the stone, the crystal, in your non-dominant hand, which is called your receiving hand, and run the thumb of your dominant hand slowly along the horizontal striations. Don't rush it. The point is not to get through them. The point is to be in contact with them. This is a somatic practice as much as a meditative one. You are giving your nervous system something physical to anchor to while your mind quiets. Notice what arises, not what you expect to arise, what actually does. For some people, this is imagery. For others, it's emotion or memory or a sense of expanded space. For some people, it's nothing in particular. And what that nothing feels like is itself information. If you're working with Lemurian Quartz for meditation, it's particularly suited to accessing the bigger picture of your life, the view from above the details and the immediate problems. It's useful when you feel isolated or disconnected from your sense of purpose, when you've lost the thread of why any of it matters. This stone is traditionally associated with vision, not nostalgia. Not looking backward, but forward. What do you see for yourself? What kind of person are you becoming? It's also traditionally used for dream work, keeping one near your bed or on your nightstand to support dream recall and to bring the imagery of your sleeping mind into clearer focus. For those who work with grids, crystal grids, Lemurian points are excellent directional stones. The termination carries energy outward from its tip. Place them pointing inward toward a central stone to draw energy to a focal point or outward to radiate. Crystal pairings worth mentioning. Celestite for crown connection. Moldavite if you want to amplify the cosmic dimension. And I'll just say, if you go that route, proceed with caution. Moldavite is not subtle. Larimar for gentle heart opening. Herkimer diamond to harmonize and amplify. And I'll tell you something about my own collection that feels relevant. The piece that I have carries the Lemurian label, and it does have the striations. But if I'm being rigorous about it, it doesn't have all of the identifying features of a true Lemurian seed crystal in the original sense. The frosted surface, the striations on exactly 3 alternating surfaces, the specific taper. And I don't think that it makes it less valid to work with, but it does make the sourcing conversation real for me. Because here's the thing, a lot of what's sold as Lemurian quartz doesn't strictly meet the original criteria. The label has expanded significantly since Raphael first applied it to those specific crystals from Serra do Cabral. That's not necessarily wrong, but it does mean that if you want to work with a true Lemurian seed crystal, sourcing matters. My recommendation is find a reputable store or dealer who can actually answer your questions about where the crystal came from, not just Brazil, but specifically where in Brazil. How was it mined and whether it came from Serra do Cabral. A good dealer will know. If they can't answer those questions, maybe you just keep looking. The crystal is worth the extra effort to source well if you want a true Lemurian quartz. And if you want to work with the mythology, the practice of running your fingers along the striations as a form of decoding, of asking the stone to reveal what it holds, is legitimate whether or not you believe in the literal Lemurian civilization. You are, at minimum, entering into a contemplative relationship with an object that formed over millions of years under conditions of intense pressure and heat. That alone deserves some attention. As with all things in this practice, whatever you bring to the stone, it will amplify. Bring your clearest question. In closing, Lemurian quartz started as a scientific hypothesis about lemur fossils. It became a theosophical myth about spiritual evolution. It became a meditation tool in the hands of crystal healers in the 1990s. And now it's in your hand, or maybe on your altar, or in a box you've been meaning to work with and haven't yet. What I want you to take from this episode is not skepticism and not uncritical belief. What I want you to take is permission to be in a real relationship with this stone, one that isn't dependent on accepting a mythology wholesale and isn't diminished by knowing the mythology's origins. The stone is real. The geology, also real. Whatever it does in your body and your nervous system when you hold it is real. The longing it points toward, for connection, for remembering, for a sense that the earth itself is intelligent and we are part of its intelligence. That longing is extraordinarily real. The myth is a map. It's not the territory. You're the territory. Stay magical. Don't forget to cleanse your crystals. And I will chat with you next week on another episode of the Crystal Library. Bye! Thank you for visiting the Crystal Library. I hope today's stone offered just the magic you needed. If you loved this episode, share it with your favorite mystic and tag me on Instagram at mystical.mama.ash or at Bid Crystal Energy Podcast. And if you're feeling generous, leave a 5-star rating and review. It helps this magic reach more curious souls. Until next time, keep your crystals close and your intuition closer.